Hey everyone, and welcome back to Humankind. Today we've got some pretty exciting news. I've just got off stream testing out the new Steam beta version of Humankind. That's beta 1.3.248, but the numbers don't matter. What matters is we have a change list here to go through, and some news for you Humankind Mac players as well. In this video, I will cover off the changes in this beta version of the patch, and what these mean for the full version of the patch, and when I think that will be. We'll also show you how you can download and play this beta version of the patch yourself, and all of the future betas too. So sit back and get comfortable, and let's jump straight in. In the background, you are seeing some footage of some of the new changes. And I'd like to start off up front here by saying, take a look at this war resolution screen. It is slightly different now. You get a better breakdown of where you're spending your war score. The war score that you earn is upfront and much more obvious. And as you can see here, you can actually take individual territories within a city. This makes it much easier, for example, to understand how you're spending your war score. I.e., why does this city cost me 3,000, whereas this other one only cost me 200? But crucially, it also gives you, the victor, assuming you've won, more control over how you settle wars. Reason being, of course, if your opponent has one mega city, which has, say, I don't know, 5 territories within it, you can divide that up and take individual territories away from the city. Very important. You'll also see some other minor adjustments here to the trade, negotiations, to the treaty screen. Everything has just been tweaked a little bit to make it that little bit more usable, but crucially those changes to the war support and the fact that we can now easily see and divide up territories is a big win for me. But take a look at this much broader list of changes. These are ridiculous. I'll have the patch notes in the description, by the way, if you want to have a look through everything. In a nutshell, there is a whole load of bug fixes and improvements in this patch, and I think a lot of us will be really clear of it. For example, the issues where battles can't be ended under certain conditions, where the AI gets stuck itself because it doesn't have anyone to target, those have been fixed. Likewise, some issues with independent people and crises as well, they're totally fixed. Loads of bug fixes, which I think is wonderful to see because, let's be real, Humankind has been out for a month now. It's long enough to start to get a feel for how the developers will be treating the game moving forward. And I think if these patch notes are anything to go by, and indeed previous ones, then we're in good hands. But there have actually been some specific gameplay tweaks as well, and I think we should cover those rather than dwelling on specific, bug fixes, patch updates, so on and so forth. Don't get me wrong. It's great if I don't have to wait for the end turn bug to happen again and again. But there are some more important changes, so let's jump in. Firstly, they've added coastal sieges. This is really important because if you used to have a coastal city, and let's say you were hogging all of the land tiles on it, if it was an island city, you literally couldn't be sieged because there was no way to actually move your units in. Now that's a thing. That's a big deal, by the way. I know it's a fix, but it's a big deal. That dedicated icon for war score that's been added as well, another big deal that I covered at the start of this video. We also now have a couple of nice little tweaks along the way. For example, game speed and difficulty is shown on your save files. Full screen option has been added to video settings. There are now also, many of you will be keen on this, inbuilt tools to manage and share your persona on G2G. G2G being Games Together, the website where we share our Humankind personas. If you haven't sent me yours on Twitter yet, I would really encourage you to go and check me out on Twitter and send me that link. I'd love to add you to my games. But moreover, actually, we've seen additional features and changes here that should impact the way we play. One that I'm particularly excited about that I'd like to highlight in this video is the reduced expansionist cost. The expansionist ability has been far too expensive for far too long. It was basically costing players like over 1,000 gold to ransack a territory, whereas you could ransack it normally for free. It didn't make sense. It's nice to see that that cost has been adjusted. I'm assuming that is a downward cost, but we don't have the specifics just yet. But I'm going to go out on a limb and say that they've made it a little bit cheaper. They've also adjusted some era stars as well, particularly the merchant and aesthete era stars now scale better with errors through the game. That's a buff to those cultures as a whole, and to be honest, I think it's one that's really needed, particularly the aesthete cultures. They were really suffering. Speaking of cultures, looking through this list and having played the beta version already live on stream, it seems to me that there has only been one culture that has been specifically nerfed so far, and that is the Huns, and specifically it's their unit, the hunnic hordes. The hunnic horde bonuses, that is the bonus food that you get. They are a nomadic unit, of course, so they behave just like, say, the tribal people who you start with. They gather food to multiply. That has been, as far as I can tell, reduced by, it seems to be around 25%, but don't quote me on that. That is just my feeling. I'd have to test it across multiple games and game speeds to really get to the bottom of it, but that is where I think it is resting at the moment. Again, this is a beta patch, so this may not all carry through into the final patch. When will we see that? That's a great question, and I'll cover that soon. But firstly, there are two more big changes buried within these patch notes that I'd like to bring to your attention. Firstly, we have reduced the impact on faith of the two initial tenets. That's shamanism or polytheism. Basically, the way this worked before was one of them would give you +5 faith per number of territories you controlled, the other would give you +1 per population. We've likely seen these things being brought more closely aligned because what happened was the population one was insane, the territories one wasn't as the game moved on. So it's nice to see that the developers are making some tweaks and changes to faith to help really strengthen that base level of faith within humankind so that they can hopefully add some more depth to it as we move through. It's also worth noting here, it's the last sort of major change, and this, to be honest, encompasses really a solid portion of the patch notes, and that's changes to pollution. Now, I expect we'll probably see the system be completely overhauled down the line. This is just me crystal ball gazing, by the way, but it wouldn't surprise me. But up front here, looking through these notes and having played with them a little bit myself, these seem like pretty good changes. Let me take you through, in a nutshell, what's happened to pollution. So, natural reserves now recapture pollution. They act as carbon sinks, which they should do because up until now all they really did was provide a little bit of influence, and it wasn't really a lot. You get them quite late in the game, they haven't really been worth building. So that's great that they act as carbon sinks. Global pollution thresholds have been increased as well by 2.5 times. So it'll take 2.5 times the amount of pollution to reach those same dire in-game levels. That's big. That's big nerf to pollution and how quickly it takes effect. There's also been a balance between local and global pollution effects, putting more importance on local pollution. Important to note, we'll have to see how that plays out as we play through, but some of the specific changes have been, for example, reducing the pollution of airports, airfields, and other special districts. Okay? Those have been reduced. Pollution reductions do not apply, however. Some infrastructure has now also had its pollution reduced from airports. That's important to note. Again, we're seeing some abilities for us as players to reduce pollution beyond just sort of not building things that pollute, right? We can now adapt and mitigate pollution a bit better than we were able to before. Equally, there's the sewage treatment plant now reduces the pollution from farmers' quarters, remembering that pollution scales, particularly once you get, I believe it's, oh boy, this is testing me on the spot, I believe it's mechanization technology, starts to make farmers' quarters and industrial quarters add pollution. This will reduce that. And likewise, a couple of other minor changes here that loosened the civics requirements to make rare civics appear more often. They've added a minimum value of multiplier to enacting and cancelling civics to prevent that exploit that I covered a week or so ago. And also some other minor changes to civics that should hopefully make them a little bit easier to get and a little bit more transparent as to how we're earning them. These are the main changes for this beta patch notes, but as I've said, there are a whole load more, including a bunch of fixes to military units, to diplomacy as well, loads of issues around grievances, war score, heresy, surrender terms, loads of bug fixes there. We'll have to see how they play out in practice, but honestly, looking through this list and reading through each and every single one of them, which I have done, I'm pretty happy overall with these changes. They look very, very good. Now, in the last part of this video, let's talk how do you get this patch, how can you get future beta patches, and will these changes carry through into the final game? And I'll start with that. Last time that we saw a beta patch, it took around 5 to 7 days for that beta version to become the main version. This time is likely the same, and that makes sense, right? Because it's already sort of out in the open, it's out in the wild. You have to go through certain steps to get it, which I'll show you in a minute, but it is there. So I suspect it'll be a matter of days rather than weeks until we see most of these changes rolled out. Indeed, it is in the beta version. We should expect some tweaks and changes, and probably some more things to be added to the full patch notes, which of course, once we have the official full patch released, I will absolutely cover that here on the channel as well, so do stay tuned if you'd like more sweet and spicy Humankind action. It is of course finally worth noting here before I move on to how to download the patch, that the Mac version has released as well. It is also a beta patch, so you'll have to follow my tips that I'm about to show you to download that. I should also note it's not currently working on M1 Mac processors, so the latest and greatest, I believe the last 2 versions, perhaps, of the MacBooks will not be able to keep up with this patch just yet. But if you're playing on Mac, you can now download Humankind and start to play it. Hallelujah! I was only 1 day off my prediction for the release of this Mac version, so I'm feeling a little bit proud of that too. Anyway, now toward the end of the video here, let me show you how you can get access to these patches during their beta versions. And if you're a Mac player, you can do this exactly the same way and start playing Humankind. So it's fairly straightforward. You just want to find Humankind in your library, right? In your game's library, so find that bad boy. Then you want to right-click and click Properties. That will bring up a Properties window where you need to go to Betas, and in the drop-down list, you want to select the beta that applies to you. If you're not a Mac player, it will be this one. In this case, it's 1.3.248. Select that, close that window, and your download will automatically start on that beta version. And that's it, ladies and gents. Thank you very much for watching this Humankind video. If you enjoyed, there's plenty more where that came from, so do stick around. And until next time and the official release of the patch, I'll catch you then. See you later, everybody. Bye-bye.